Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson from Unit 1 about theories of government is Lesson 3 about why we have government. In this lesson, you'll learn about the political philosopher Thomas Hobbes and about the political philosopher John Locke, about the concepts of the state of nature and the state of war, and about the consequences that flow from those ideas. In our previous lesson, we learned about the potentially frightening power that our government has. And we asked the question of why we would be willing to live with something so frightening as part of our daily lives. This lesson will begin to provide the answer to that question. The short answer, which you won't understand yet, is that living with a government over us is better than the alternative. Something that political philosophers call the state of nature. To understand what is the state of nature and how it relates to our acceptance of government today, we can go back over 350 years to the writings of Thomas Hobbes, an English philosopher. Hobbes lived during a time when the English people were questioning whether they should have a king. Hobbes wrote his book, Leviathan, in defense of the monarchy. In doing so, he chose to first explain why we even have government, before justifying the king's place in it. 40 years later, another English philosopher approached the same questions about why we have a government and the place of a king in it. His name was John Locke. Unlike Hobbes, Locke argued against having a king. Though these two men reached different conclusions about the value of a king, they had much in common in how they explained the origin of and the purpose of government. Their ideas, and particularly the arguments of John Locke, had a profound influence on the founders of the United States of America. If any philosopher could claim credit for the creation of the American nation, it would be John Locke. Now that you know whose ideas we will be drawing upon, we can return to our immediate topic, the state of nature. What is the state of nature, and how does it lead us to government? The state of nature is a hypothetical world, imagined by men like Hobbes and Locke, in which government does not exist. They imagine such a place to try to figure out why we would want government in our lives. Take a moment and try to imagine for yourself what a world without government would be like. What dangers might exist? What opportunities? How would you spend your days there? How much freedom would you have? When Locke thought about this, he reasoned that in the state of nature, each of us would be perfectly free to do as we pleased with our lives and with our possessions. This is an important point, so let me emphasize it. Without a government existing to tell us otherwise, we are each absolutely free to do anything we want. Anything. As Hobbes considered what would happen to people given absolute freedom, he decided to call the state of nature a state of war, because he believed that destructive conflict would be inevitable in such a situation. Hobbes believed that conflict was inevitable in a state of nature because people would compete for resources, thus making them enemies who would try to eliminate their competition. With no government to stop them, they would use any means they chose to get what they wanted. The inevitable conflict over resources would lead to violence, unless, Hobbes believed, a common power kept both parties in check. In other words, unless there is an entity which can restrain people from stealing from each other and attacking each other, they will steal from each other and attack each other. This is a very negative view of human nature. Is Hobbes right? Can you think of any real-world situations that support his view? In 2005, a massive hurricane named Katrina was headed for the city of New Orleans. Government officials recommended that everyone evacuate the city, and many did, including the government itself. But not everyone fled. What was life like without the government there to maintain order? There was widespread looting, as seen in the picture to the left. This led people to take up arms to protect themselves, such as the man on the right, who spray painted on the side of his house that he was protected against looters by 2 shotguns, a claw hammer, a big dog, and an ugly woman. One blogger referred to the situation in the city as being like Lord of the Flies. Perhaps you've read that book, about a group of children who are marooned on an island without any adult supervision and end up killing each other. If this is how we act when there are no rules to control us, what are the consequences of being in the state of nature, beyond just fearing for our lives? If we live in constant fear of violence from others, we will spend our time and energy protecting ourselves against that threat, which means we will not be doing other things with our time and energy. We will not have the opportunity to build industry. We will not create art. We will not develop science. We will not tolerate the company of strangers. Should we spend time writing poetry when bandits and murderers might arrive at any moment to steal our stuff and destroy us? We can conclude that living in the state of nature, living in a world without government, would be an awful way to spend our lives. Thomas Hobbes most famously described life in the state of nature as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That completes this lesson. Now let's review what we learned. Who is Thomas Hobbes? Did he try to justify having a king? Did he try to justify anarchy? Did he try to justify revolution? Or did he try to justify popular rule? Hobbes wrote the Leviathan to justify having a king. If life without government is so scary, perhaps we need someone to protect us. Why is John Locke important? Is it because he inspired the overthrow of the British king? Is it because he stopped the overthrow of the British king? Is it because he inspired America's founding fathers? Or is it because he supported anarchy? John Locke is the philosopher who most directly inspired America's founding fathers and the American Revolution. But that revolution did not overthrow the British king. What is the state of nature? Is it a clean environment? Is it a primitive country? Is it life without government? Or is it a properly ordered society? The state of nature is life without government. What is the state of war? Is it legal disagreements? Is it a country with a large military? Is it conflict without a common judge? Or is it fighting within a society? A state of war, as the term was used by philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, refers to the conflict that will inevitably exist between everyone without a common judge over them. What are the consequences of the state of nature or the state of war? Will there be no industry, art, or education? Will there be abundant profits for the rich? Will there be a loss of civil liberties? Or will there be more scientific discoveries? In the state of nature, or the state of war, people will be too busy just trying to stay alive and hold on to their stuff to engage in industry, art, or education. That completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 1. It'll be lesson 4 about quitting the state of nature.